I'm, this will not, this is sort of a walk down a lane, kind of a lane, the Wizard of Oz, walking down a lane, the yellow brick road today, to speak what I, at this point in ministry and life, make of the extremely pertinent and applicable insights that this church is all about. The conference has gone very well, at least in Mary's and my opinion so far. Pat Thurmer's comments were remarkable and deeply accessible. And Tullian's talk and answers in Suite 16 were Tullian at his extreme best, the either-or quality of his understanding of the grace of God. He's absolutely unique. It's very close, this is seriously true, to Martin Luther at his most powerful in the early 1520s. There is a power and a lack of apology and direct contact with the human drama of loss and sorrow and pain that is worthy, in actual fact, from what I just heard, of Luther in the early 1520s. It's that good. And of course, when I say it, the opposite will be true, but I hope he and Stacy can do this for at least another 12 years because it's beginning to really roll. And these virtual groups have enormous, enormous potential, which the world so strongly needs. So we also heard Steve Brown last night, who was his classic, quizzical, delightful self. And then Sarah, I mean, I've heard Sarah before, but the combination of humor, truth, and depth is, again, it's quite unique. I know nothing like what we have heard today between these different people. And I know that Stacy was of that quality this morning also. So I think we're on a roll here. It's going very well. I'm wearing this shirt. It's not my style at all, but I'm wearing this shirt because it was the shirt that I intentionally wore the first time Tullian ever interviewed me years and years ago at a church that was called Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. And Mary and I spent many happy times at Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. Now, and this is what I wore when I would go to Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. Daniel, could you put up one particular picture? This, in 1974, Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church in Fort Lauderdale, so this is absolutely accurate, was architected by a man named Harold Wagner. 1971 to 74, and it became a very famous church. What people don't realize that Harold Wagner's son was a huge student, as am I, of early 1960s sci-fi. And a movie had been released, some of you have seen it, in 1961 in East Germany. It's an East German science fiction movie called The First Spaceship on Venus. You can see it easily on the YouTube. It's both terrible and wonderful. But in it, the designers that were all East German filmmakers gave the prototype of what literally would become Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. And notice what it says about the antecedent of Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. Listen, you are there as they discover the Venusians' petrified forest. You are there as they are attacked by crawling, living lava. And finally, you are there as they brave the raging, irradiated Venus quake. Now, can you imagine a movie poster that would talk about the irradiated Venus quake? Well, I only say that because the main reason that I loved him initially was that he was the pastor of Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. You may now move ahead. Now, let me just talk a little bit about the life pattern, the pathway through the emerald forest, the yellow brick road of human experience, and try to give you a few fresh pictures of how that works out in light of this remarkable focus on the grace of God in Christ. Let me just give you some pictures of it. And what I like to say, I've been saying this a few years, and I've not changed my sense of observation, is that in human life, from the cradle to the grave, there's something that I call phosphorus. Now, you know what phosphorus is. It's a chemical that you can rub on your feet or your hands or any part of your body, and when the lights go down, it glows. And there's an important Sherlock Holmes story and movie about a criminal who gets away with what he does by putting phosphorus on his hands and his feet to commit certain kinds of crimes late at night. But phosphorus shines in the darkness. And what happens with many people that I know is that there are moments in life that are phosphorus. These are the moments that stand out. Even they may come from your second year of life, from your 18th year of life, even from your 35th year of life, but seldom after that, because they're sort of imprinted. And phosphorus moments are the core moments of your life. These are the moments that you will be thinking about when you are dying. I'm just one person, but I've ministered to countless people almost at the point of death. And what recurs, and you've seen this with people you know, you've seen this with your mom and dad and with other people, is that phosphorus moments come back to people when they are at the end. The moments of phosphorus from your life. And these moments are almost always two possibilities. One is acceptance, and the other is rejection. In other words, the most important things in a human life, looking at the way it actually pans out, is either moments of acceptance and belovedness, which are usually 2 or 3, seldom more, maybe 4, but max, because the other ones sort of lose their luminosity in light of the earlier ones, or rejection. And the purpose of life is to connect with the phosphorus moments of acceptance and belovedness on the one hand, and to be healed from phosphorus moments of rejection. Now just think for a minute of a phosphorus moment of rejection that you've experienced. Now, you probably remember, but Dylan Thomas used to say that after the first death, there are no others. After the first death, said Dylan Thomas, there are no others. In other words, after the primal loss, the primary pain, the loss of a parent, a mother, a dad, a sibling, and a loss of someone you loved at some point through death or rejection or whatever. These are powerful, riveting moments, and they come back. Now, people used to say that time heals all wounds. It's one of those, we were listening to the beautiful Sarah Rev episode, and that's sort of a typical thing people will say. Oh, well, in time, you'll forget about him. It's a complete not true thing. Most of what you hear as practical aphorisms of common sense are simply not true. They're ways to deny the obvious. And what is true about rejection and acceptance or belovedness is that it has no clock. It will never subside in its power over you if it came at the wrong/the right time. You will never, ever forget. And certain things that happened in you, whether it's your childhood or your adolescence, after your adolescence, they fade. Things just don't have the same power. But certain things that happened to you in your adolescence and your childhood, they have no clock. By the way, Freud said that. Freud said primary pain has no clock. So you can be 87, you can be ministering to your mother or your dad at 87 in Advent Health, and they will suddenly talk about something that you've never heard about, that happened to them when they were 17 or 12 or 27, you never have heard about it. And they're going to their death focused as if it were right in the now of something that happened 80 years ago. This is simply a fact. I'm not trying to convey an imperative or a kind of a maxim, simply to say it's an empirically verifiable fact that phosphorus moments of acceptance and rejection have no clock, and they are as powerful to you today without any diminution, if you get to that point, as they were when they happened. Now, this is where the great healing about which the sanctuary is purposefully looking occurs. Now, Bishop Morris Maddox, the Church of England, about a third of its bishops were holy men in the old days, about a third. A third were scholars, a third were administrators, and a third were saints in the Church of England. In the American Episcopal Church, a ninth were saints, and the rest were administrators, with a few journalists thrown in. But in the church in which Mary and I were trained, there were people like Bishop Morris Maddox. And Bishop Morris Maddox used to say, and I've quoted it, you've heard it many times, God meets us at our point of need. Bishop Maddox, just his whole life was on that. And if you go to Groombridge in Kent, which I recommend you do, it's a small, beautiful village in Kent, England. There's a place called Burswood there, and it's the first Christian healing hospital that was ever established in the British Isles, and it still exists. And something that very few people know, do you know where John Stott went to die? He did not go to Lindisfarne. He went to Burswood Hospital in Groombridge, Kent. John Stott, just think about it. Because Morris Maddox utterly and completely built an entire lifetime of pastoral care on the confidence that God meets us at our point of need. Now, this is nothing new to anyone here. That's why you're here. And that's why this Tullian and Stacy's focus on AA groups and regeneration groups and the kind of groups you're doing. That's the future of the church in many ways, because what happens in the church is the very thing that it was founded to be, it becomes the opposite. It's just true of life. Every institution you know, from the school you went to the college you went to the social service agency you support in your spare time, all of them end up becoming, over time, the opposite of the very thing they were intended to be. And you will find no exceptions. That will include the United States government, that will include the military, that will include the best social outreach organizations. They all end up becoming the means becomes the end. So the power of what's happening is that the end, which is healing, in light of the phosphorus of rejection in particular, and the hope of acceptance and the power of that, that is why this church is a church. Now, the image that's behind you is one of Mary's and my favorite images of the human condition. Now, you've seen this movie, but you don't remember it. Some of you do. In 1942, a movie called Mrs. Miniver was made. And it was made in the middle of World War II, when it was still doubtful, the outcome. Made in Hollywood, and it won Best Picture, Best Actress for Greer Garson, Best Screenplay for James Hilton, Best Direction for William Wyler. It won every conceivable Academy Award because of its power in showing a family in an English village that was being blitzed and destroyed from A to Z by the advent of the war and the blitz on England. And in it, at the very, very end, after some of the characters have died in the war, others have distinguished themselves, and they're all kind of in shock. The last scene in the movie is this scene. And in it, the vicar, that's the Tullian character there, because he's a man of God. Interesting, in those days, a minister was often portrayed as a man of God. A man of God is preaching a comfort to the congregation who are all bundled up like till today, no heat. And he's preaching morning prayer, and he's in an elevated pulpit. And what do you see behind him? You see a gaping hole in the roof, because that's where a German bomber heading to the Channel to go back to Germany after bombing London in 1941 dropped all its available undropped weapons, bombs, wherever they would go, and a bomb had hit the church and it had created a gaping hole in the roof. Now that is my favorite picture currently outside of first spaceship on Venus, because by the way, have you been listening to the soundtrack during our time so far? Have you been listening to the music that the Spotify playlist? It's got Sting. It's got the Police. Unfortunately, it has Pink Floyd, but we have to. But the human condition is exactly what you see. This is the human condition, and the purpose of this conference. And the purpose of the Christian gift of God's grace from the eternal God is to heal people from the gaping holes in the roof of our lives. Now think a minute about the gaping hole. As I use that phrase, by the way, you can see it. It's the last scene. And FDR, the President of the United States, was so impressed by this last scene and by the sermon that the actor, whose name was Henry Wilcoxon, gave, that he had it run off and dropped in the thousands over occupied Europe before D-Day, because it's so powerful. But think of your life as if you care, and you may identify as having a gaping hole in the roof to which the Word of God is still, even though, notice, the pulpit's been destroyed, so it's on a kind of box where he's speaking. He's speaking to the people who are living with a gaping hole. So the purpose of this talk is to bring it to a kind of a head by inviting you, in light of the conference, to think of the gaping hole. Now, it may not exist in everybody. We're not saying you have to have a gaping hole to qualify, but what people find is, over time, that often there is one there, a gaping hole. We were talking to a marvelous gentleman back in Birmingham, where some of you have come from, the Brazils and Mr. Ware and others, and he was saying, after I showed him that picture, man of great human achievement, he said, well, Paul, but not young, what if you have 4 or 5 gaping holes in the roof of your life? Well, there are, just stop for a minute. Let's just think for a minute. Can I envisage something that might correspond to a gaping hole in the roof of my actual life? Well, let's find a little bit now of the way forward with it. Now, the two things that I will say, and then I'll give an illustration, and then I'll say one final thing. The two things that I would say about the gaping hole is, number one, is that one-way love is always an antidote to the gaping hole. Now, in fact, it usually comes through another human being. One-way love usually, in fact, comes through another human being. That's God. That's Jesus Christ incarnate in a person. But it generally comes through an individual who loves you when you are deeply in the tiefe, the depths of rejection. You are feeling the depths of rejection. Even if it's a long way away, it's come back to you and it wakes you up at night. Or it's suddenly being replayed in your son's addiction. Or it's being played out in some terrible thing at work, which has involved personnel, and you're about to lose your job. One-way love usually from another person, but it's God's one-way love, is the primary antidote to the phosphorus of rejection that is expressed in that picture. One other aspect of that, there are two things. One-way love, known as justification and atonement. The other is some personal answer to prayer. Now, I'm at this point in ministry, after 50 years of pastoral care, I think Mary and I would both agree that one-way love, which we constantly instantiate in our preaching and the Bible and the communion service, etc., and also specific prayers for concrete personal intervention. And that's, oddly enough, a place where many people sometimes pause. You have a situation that is, you're thinking about a great deal of the time, comes at you all the time when you're quiet. And this situation requires an intervention from the God side. And that is the only way it will be brought to some kind of healing. So I'm going to invite you to piggyback on top of the profoundest message possible of the power of God's and a person's altruistic, self-giving love to repair the gaping hole in the wall, the roof, with the concrete desire to ask God to help you in a particular situation. Now, Tullian and Stacy are so good at this here, but even here, there are individuals in the sanctuary, you and me, all of us, who have one thing in our lives that we do not believe God can help us with. It's not because we don't believe it intellectually, but there's usually one element, a memory, a pattern, a gripping emotional state that we've given up believing can be helped. And so I'm going to invite you at the end to just spend a minute resurrecting in the negative sense. It's like Dr. Blood's Coffin. Dr. Blood's Coffin was a brilliant 1962 British movie about many people, really ridiculous but wonderful, dead people who rise up in a small Cornish village. Anyway, be that as it may, I'm going to invite you to do a Dr. Blood's Coffin with one element that you've sort of, and I join you here, have given up praying for. Mary and I are deeply involved in a pastoral situation of extraordinary pathos currently, extraordinary loss, suffering, and pathos in the situation where we live day to day. And we have been specifically praying for one individual who is not young, who has taken this terrible, tragic experience to heart in a way that has been very, very, our hearts go out to a particular human being, and yet there's nothing we can do. Every time we've tried, we've been repulsed, and we've nothing we can do. And the other night, we both, for some strange reason, together prayed for a situation, concretely. And it was classic. Within about 10 seconds, we got a message from such a person. We got an actual message from someone we love very much, but who had been so worn down by a tragic situation. And again, we said to ourselves, why don't we do this more often? Why do we constantly live with the gaping hole in the roof of our lives? And we constantly exempt one or two, but let's say one particular irresoluble personal issue from the catalog of things we would say to God. So that's what I'm going to say to you. Well, I'm going to finish now by quoting two works of unbelievably obscure literature. But to me, the more obscure, the more applicable. And an author named Hugh Walpole wrote many novels in the 1930s that no one reads at all today. But one of them was made into a brilliant movie in 1948. And it has the really sexy title, Mr. Perrin and Mr. Trail. I'm sure that people all over America just flocked to see this movie called Mr. Perrin and Mr. Trail. But in it, the movie is brilliant. The movie is fantastic. It's about an English boarding school. But don't worry, it's about a lot more than that. And in it, the movie, the original title, it was a successful novel, is here, called Mr. Perrin and Mr. Trail. But the author, Hugh Walpole, did two versions. The same year, published exactly the same, he did two versions of it. And this is called, my voice hasn't changed yet, and I'm working on that. There's a specialist at Advent Health who helps people whose voices have not yet changed. But The Gods and Mr. Perrin. And I just want to say why these little-known novels are incomparably brilliant. Because in the first one, a ridiculously dweebish, fuddy-duddy English prep school teacher who's an idiot has fallen in love with a sort of a younger girl who lives in one of the ancillary buildings. And he's totally doesn't stand a chance. And the handsome, young, athletic rugby guy in the school faculty wins her heart. And he becomes so mad that they have a violent confrontation on a cliff. And Mr. Perrin, who's the total dweeb, by mistake, pushes the big athletic man, and he falls 100 feet off a cliff into the water. Now the dweeb realizes that the man who's unconscious but still alive will drown in the next 15 minutes if he is not rescued and brought up. And so Mr. Perrin, the idiot, realizes that the only thing that can be done for this man whom he has murdered is to climb down and save the man's life. And this is how it ends. He saves the man, who's much bigger than him, drags him up to an elevated cliff, saves the man, but the tide is now so great that the cliff can only hold one man. And the dweeb, 50-year-old ridiculous teacher, has saved the very man he almost murdered and realizes that he is going to die. And it says this: "Now at last Mr. Perrin was justified. No one would ever know. Mr. Trail would never know who had saved his life. And after all these weeks intending to kill Mr. Trail, he was now giving his life for him. All that he had ever needed in life was a justification, why he should exist at all. Now he was justified. So he took Mr. Trail's unconscious hand, which hung down, lightly kissed it, laughed, never been so happy in his life, and then let himself go." Now that is how a man finds a new being, an entirely new creation, prepared for all that may lie after death by an act of unbelievable incarnate self-sacrifice. And, however, in the other version, he is so angry at this man who he hates in the other version of the same story that he decides to go and kill himself. It's about suicide. Mr. Perrin decides to kill himself. And as he's going to kill himself, guess who he runs into? The girl who's beautiful and young and very, very together. She runs right into him as he, the bad object, is going. She suddenly realizes what's happening. She realizes, she's only 18. And she changes his mind. She realizes that the only thing that will save this man from suicide is by loving him, absolutely expressing her love for him, and if he kisses her, agreeing, and happily so. She noticed, it says, same situation, different ending. She noticed that his speech was suddenly clear of all its little pomposities. He seemed another man from the strange creatures whom she had met before. Curiously, as she listened to this strange, uncouth figure explaining himself and holding her hand, she felt more strongly moved than she had ever been before. Mr. Perrin at the end drew a deep breath and says, "If you will help me, I will come back now." And the new day shone about their heads. Now that is what you and I need with the gaping hole as much as anything. You and I, in my opinion, can ask a personal, intervening, atonement-bearing God to answer our prayer of help when the roof of our lives is still interdicted by a gaping hole of malfeasance and vulnerability and ultimately a flash flood. So let's take just a moment, just a quick moment here, and see if you can join me in the quiet to consider what that hole currently looks like. And then I'll say a prayer and we'll be done. Dear Son of Man, answer our deepest prayer for healing and relief and coverage for the hole that we wrestle with. Have mercy upon us, O Father, for the sake of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Thank you.